www.nola.gov. And we will be posting this webinar on our YouTube channel. I know it says our website on this slide, but we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to introduce today's speakers. Today, we have two speakers. We have Claudia Rigo, who is the director of Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board. She earned her degrees from Purdue University, the University of Georgia, and obtained a PhD from the University of Florida. In 2004, she became the principal research entomologist for the City of New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board. In 2006, she became assistant director, and in 2010, she was promoted to director of the department. We have Erin Clordy Duvernay, who holds a PhD in entomology with a concentration in insect toxicology from Louisiana State University. Erin also holds a Master of Science in Public Health and Tropical Medicine with a concentration in parasitology from Tulane University School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. Erin has been an entomologist with the City of New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board for 9 years. Her research includes both local and international projects focused on barrier treatments, IPM, insect resistance, parasite surveillance, product testing, the public perception of pest control, and vector-borne disease. And now, Erin.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction, Anastasia. I'm just going to back up to just go over a brief outline of today's presentation. So I'm going to give you a history of IPM. Then we'll talk about IPM principles and really get into integrated mosquito management. We'll talk about surveillance and monitoring, biocontrol, chemical control, insecticide resistance testing, prevention and community engagement, and lastly, we'll talk about the Gulf South Vector Education Center for Training, Outreach, and Resources. So first, what is integrated pest management, right? So one of the biggest challenges that we face is finding sustainable and environmentally friendly solutions for ecosystem management. Pests are a nuisance, but can also be a health and safety risk. So integrated pest management, or IPM, is an effective and environmentally sensitive approach to pest management that relies on a combination of common sense practices. So IPM programs use current comprehensive information on the life cycles of pests and their interaction with the environment. So this information, in combination with available pest control methods, is used to manage pest damage by the most economical means and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and the environment. Okay, so government agencies bear some responsibility for keeping the public safe and healthy. All right, so you've got public health, environmental maintenance, resource management. This includes safety concerning the use of pesticides and herbicides. So IPM strategies allow us to grow food, reduce or eliminate pests, reduce disease burden in a manner that is safer, more effective, and more environmentally friendly and more cost efficient. IPM is not a single pest control method, but rather a series of pest management evaluations, decisions, and controls. So here we're going to do a little brief history of integrated pest management, which also coincides a little bit with the history of insecticide resistance. So in the early 1900s, cultural practices were used to prevent agricultural infestations. There was manual removal of pests and crop rotation, and they did use some arsenic and some other, natural chemicals that killed insects. In the 1930s and 40s, chemical means of control became popular. It was cheaper and less labor intensive, right? You'd have a bunch of people picking, insects off of plants. DDT came on the market, and a lot of these chemicals that started to come out, they originally came from agricultural chemical control, right? And then later were used for different kinds of pests or vectors of disease. 1950s, again, agricultural pests primarily controlled by chemical means. Insecticide resistance is becoming more common. There's resurgence of pests after treatment. And there's seen a death of natural enemies resulting in the occurrence of secondary pests. Now, in the 60s, Rachel Carlson published a book or wrote a book called Silent Spring. And this brought a lot of public attention to the adverse effects of chemicals on wildlife, water quality, human health. DDT was used a lot, right, in the 40s and the 50s, and there's biomagnification in foods and in milk. They started to see resistance of pests to pesticides, so they called them superbugs and superweeds. And then in the 70s, you have more public and scientific awareness that led to public policy changes, right? So research begins on IPM approaches to pest control, not just using chemical control as a means to control pests. The USDA created a nationwide IPM program, and the EPA was created in the 70s and was given jurisdiction over pesticide registration and regulations. Now, in the 80s and the 90s and beyond, you have genetically modified crops. There's an emphasis again on cultural practices. So people start using crop rotation and rotating their herbicides or their pesticides. Biocontrol research really takes off. It was used in the past, but it starts to make a comeback. There's human health studies that are done. Food Quality Protection Act was passed, and this brings changes to pesticide laws in the United States. There's also a new emphasis on softer and more specifically target or low volume chemical uses. So, as mentioned, IPM uses a combination of methods of science-grounded and data-based approaches to control pests, and it aims to reduce the environmental impact. So it develops comprehensive plans for when to act and evaluates effectiveness of those actions. IPM emphasizes monitoring and identification of pests for data to use in action decision. IPM uses a multi-life cycle approach to pest control that includes preventative measures and cultural behavioral practices. And IPM utilizes the least harmful control methods and only when needed, emphasizes the judicious use of pesticides. So again, we've got the four main aspects of IPM are going to be setting action thresholds, monitoring and identification, prevention, and control. So let's talk about action thresholds. So before taking any pest control action, IPM first sets an action threshold, a point at which pest populations or environmental conditions indicate that pest control action must be taken, right? So they provide a benchmark for action. Citing a single pest does not always mean control is needed. The level at which pests will become an economic threat is critical to guide future pest control decisions. All right, so you've got economic injury level, EIL, which is the lowest population density of a pest that will cause economic damage. You've got economic threshold, ET. The density of a pest has reached a point at which a management intervention is justified. So the most cost-efficient point of intervention. However, some public health pests require control, sometimes even at smaller numbers. Okay, so decisions to initiate control are based on analysis of data, including immature and adult surveillance, arbovirus surveillance, climatic conditions, and other information. The use of baseline information gathered from historical surveillance data is advisable to establish these action thresholds. Okay. So control districts must determine their own action thresholds. Some choose metrics like the minimum infection rate. Okay, so this is the number of positive pools divided by the total number of mosquitoes trapped times 1,000. A ratio of 5 and 1,000 is used by CDC as a benchmark to take emergency action. Now, this is when we have vectors of disease that we're talking about. And it can be problematic because the underlying assumption of the minimum infection rate is that only one infected individual exists in a positive pool, right? There could be more. This is not the case for viruses with higher incidence like West Nile, though. All right, let's talk about monitoring and identification. All right, so IPM programs must monitor pest populations and have capacity to identify them correctly, right? Monitoring and identification reduces the possibility that pesticides will be used when they're not really needed, and it also ensures correct pesticide is used. In the case of mosquito control, accurate identification of species is crucial for testing and control of disease vectors. Note, not all mosquitoes are vectors of disease. Not all insects, weeds, and other living organisms require control. Many organisms are innocuous and some are even beneficial, right? So IPM programs work to monitor for pests and identify them accurately so that appropriate control decisions can be made in conjunction with action thresholds. All right, so this monitoring and identification removes the possibility that pesticides will be used when they are not really needed, or again, that the wrong kind of pesticide will be used, right? So prevention, behavioral or cultural practices can be used to reduce the risk of pests establishing or to keep numbers low. Sanitation, maintenance of vegetation and structures are part of prevention. Food waste management, maintaining screens on doors and windows, and source reduction. We'll get a lot more into source reduction later, that removal and maintenance of potential breeding sites. So as the first line of pest control, IPM programs work to manage crop, lawn, or indoor space to prevent pests from becoming a threat, right? So in an agricultural crop, this may mean using cultural methods such as rotating between different crops, selecting pest-resistant varieties, and plant pest-free rootstock. These methods can be very effective and cost-efficient and present little to no risk to people or the environment. And when it comes to mosquitoes, prevention, like removing standing water from your yard, you're getting rid of their breeding sites, and therefore you're getting the immature mosquitoes, so you will have less adults in your area, right? These are all prevention things you can do. Control can be accomplished through pesticides or herbicides. This is a necessary tool in the IPM framework, but should be used judiciously with minimum risk in mind. So not all chemicals are alike from the standpoint of their range of action, toxicity, or persistence in the environment. Biological control is also an option and uses natural enemies to reduce pest populations. There are some great success stories, and it may require extensive research and field and laboratory testing prior to application. So examples of integrated pest management, they look very different depending on the context, right? You've heard me mention agricultural pests, right? So agricultural pests, you have pest-resistant crops and crop rotation. And with rodents, you can manage landscape and food waste, right? Sanitation is a huge part of IPM with rodent control. School IPM, exclusion, food waste management, biocontrol, minimum targeted pesticide use, right? You have to be very careful using pesticides around schools. General pest control, cockroach control with exclusion, food and water management, sticky traps, various pesticide approaches. And we even have antimicrobial control. Antimicrobials, fungicides, and disinfectants applied to surfaces are regulated by EPA. All right, IPM plans include using means to achieve these goals. So you need to know your pathogen and know the correct level of control and disinfectant classes for specific pathogens. So let's talk about integrated mosquito management, right? So we've got surveillance, biocontrol, chemical control, insecticide resistance monitoring, and public education. Now, we've touched on all of these topics throughout this webinar series, right? So in part 1, 2, and 3. So this is going to bring them all together, all right? So first, what is the difference between a survey and surveillance? Are they the same thing? No, they're not, okay? A survey is a one-time gathering of data for a specific purpose, like a questionnaire, right? Surveillance is repeated data collection over time. All right, so whether you're going to be testing municipal water quality, once a month, reporting hospital disease reporting once a month, right? It's how many mosquitoes did we trap in this one spot every week for 52 weeks, all right? That's what surveillance is. Mosquito surveillance programs, they're out there. We have one here in New Orleans. Why are they important? They tell us which species are active and if they are vectors. We can test vector species weekly for arboviruses. Mosquito surveillance provides location and seasonal patterns of species. It helps with resource and staff planning. It contributes to regional and national databases for tracking mosquito populations. Now, there's appropriate and timely response to surveillance data, all right? And this is key to preventing and controlling mosquito-borne disease outbreaks. So here you've got pictured a couple of different traps that we use in mosquito surveillance, all right? These are traps to collect adult mosquitoes. So in New Orleans, we've had a surveillance program going on for a few decades. And over the years, we've increased our surveillance sites throughout the city. All right, so you can see our little map of New Orleans, and you can see how the dots start to grow, right? In 06, we've got these little triangles, little black triangles. We've got these blue dots in 2016, 17, lots of green dots. And you can see in 2018, the map's expanded, and we're really hitting all over the city. Now, weekly surveillance, as I mentioned, we do year-round monitoring of mosquito populations here in New Orleans. We have over 45 surveillance sites. We have weekly collections that determine mosquito abundance, species composition, species distributions, and even infection rates. All right, most sites are used for West Nile vector surveillance with Culex, looking for Culex fasciatus, but we're also looking for Aedes vectors as well. And what other species happen to be in those traps, they all get identified. Now, we also do arbovirus screening, all right? And this is another part of IPM, mosquito management. Mosquitoes are brought to the lab and identified, right, from these traps. Species of concern are stored in tubes, and we take them to LSU, and they get tested. They get brought to LSU on Wednesday. We get the results from the arbovirus screening on usually Friday afternoons. And control decisions are made immediately based on vector numbers and arbovirus results. Okay, it's a core activity of our surveillance program. All right, and if you're doing any kind of arbovirus screening, these control decisions should be a core activity of your surveillance program as well. And one of the things I mentioned is that based on the vector numbers and arbovirus results. So in New Orleans, we don't just spray on a weekly basis, right? Just to spray, right? Again, it's our decisions are made, they're all data-driven decisions, right? If we have very low numbers of mosquitoes and none of them are vectors of disease, most likely we're not going to spray. Now, there's also surveillance for larvae and pupa, right? New Orleans Mosquito Termite Rodent Control Board does surveillance for immature mosquito larvae. Remember that 3 out of the 4 mosquito life stages are aquatic, all right? So you've got 3 chances in the aquatic stage to get rid of these mosquitoes before they become adults and fly away. And they're going to show up in different areas, right? You'll find them in the cemeteries, in flower vases. You'll find them in old tires, whether they're waste tires that are abandoned or just a tire, hanging out in your driveway, right? You'll find them in bird baths. You'll find them in gutters, right? So we also do breeding site surveillance. All right, so this is looking for areas where mosquitoes breed. And when I say breeding site, I'm defining that as habitats where animals go to mate and reproduce. All right, this is the definition by the National Agricultural Library. All right, so we do breeding site surveillance, looking at habitats where mosquitoes produce, right, reproduce, whether it's in, a swale, that's holding water after a rainstorm, or even if it's like a small stagnant pond, or waste tires that are holding mosquitoes, right? That is a breeding habitat for them, for container breeders. So we do active surveillance, right? We're not putting traps out, right, and coming back to pick them up 24 hours later. We're using dip cups, as you see here, right? This guy's out there standing in the water with a dip cup. We do service requests, right? When you call 311 and you ask us to come do an inspection, we'll do an inspection of your yard or this end or the surrounding area. We do observations, right, during our regular work. If we're driving around to go do a 311 service request for rodents, and if we happen to see standing water, we're going to go see if there's larvae in there and treat it appropriately. Some of our concerns are going to be swales, tires, again, drainage ditches, infrastructure related issues like potholes and construction that have long-standing water in them. So this is a map of breeding site surveillance in New Orleans, and this is actually just from a couple of years ago. We have even larger maps or more data today. So the blue dots are tire piles. The red dots are swales, so the shallow areas of water, and the green dots are green infrastructure issues, right? So that's a lot of breeding sites, and you can see where they're like, you have more of a conglomerate. The tires are everywhere, right? But you can see certain areas have more stuff than others. And then we map this data so we can use it to recheck areas of concern and for treatment purposes. And we can share this data with other agencies in New Orleans, like the sanitation department, who can go and pick up these large tire piles. And when I say large tire piles, for those of you that haven't seen them or don't know New Orleans very well, we have sometimes thousands, 3,000 tires, 5,000 tires, a 10,000 tire pile, right? So we need the help of other agencies to collect these. All right, let's talk about biocontrol. Okay, so utilizing natural enemies to control populations of unwanted organisms. So we're using one living organism to get rid of another living organism. The success varies depending on the system and requires ample research. All right, an important part of integrated mosquito management is using biocontrol. Okay, it focuses on the immature life stage, again, of the mosquitoes, right? So we're attacking the aquatic life stage of mosquitoes. There's non-native and there's also native species, right? You really want to try and use native species. You don't want to go outside and bring something into the environment that once it eats all the mosquito larvae, it's going to start disrupting the life cycle or the habitats of other species that we have. So there's been a lot of success with biocontrol. There's in the, I guess, 1860s to 1890s, going back some ways, you've got the cottony cushion scale and the cardinal ladybird beetle. Okay, so the scale species, the type of insect, wreaked havoc on citrus crops in California. And they had 5 cases of where the ladybugs were released into the orchard, and the scale species was eradicated in 2 years. There's IPM biological control of spider mites nearly saved the Washington apple industry. All right. Lady beetles, parrot bugs, and other predatory mites keep populations of crop destroying mites controlled, and allows for a reduction of chemical use, right, when you use these biocontrol methods. So some examples with mosquitoes and biocontrol. This was in 2016, New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board worked with Operation Blessings and the Honduran government to use biocontrol methods in a remote village that had human cases of dengue and Zika, and they could not use chemical control due to insecticide resistance. So this, the big picture is a photo of a pila, which is an outdoor basin with no drain, where they held water, right? They have a lot of standing water because they only got water once a week. And they would use this water for washing themselves, for washing their dishes, for just for cleaning. Um, and it would breed mosquito larvae, right? So here in that person's hand is a small turtle, all right? And they will eat the immature larva. They would also put in a small fish that would eat the immature mosquito larva. There was a lot of community education and participation in this village. They actually taught them how to rear copepods and use these small crustaceans, which we'll get into in a little bit, and how to use them to keep their drinking water clean. And these were native species that they found in their own area. So keeping with biocontrol of mosquitoes, there's turtles, there's fish, there's copepods, which is this large photo on the bottom, and there's even predatory mosquitoes like toxbronchitis. Now, there's also bacterial control, and bacteria is a living organism, right? One cell living organism, but so people do group it in with biocontrol, but technically, according to the federal government, it is listed as chemical control. All right. So like if you use it as a commercial pesticide applicator, you've got to document it. But this is something that is also actually available in stores for homeowner use. So let's talk about mosquito fish, right? They've got a broad diet. They can survive without larvae. They're small and easy to manipulate. They survive in a variety of habitats, especially low oxygenated water. They tolerate wide temperature range, right? So they're perfect for New Orleans because they actually, I think, do probably better in low oxygenated warm water. They reproduce very quickly. And we use them in pools and fountains and ponds, and even some broken fountains. And then they're also used in other parishes for drainage ditches, right? St. Tammany uses them a lot. And you can see they're small. And then these are copepods. So copepods are tiny crustaceans that are naturally abundant. They occur in a lot of different places, and they're predators of first instar mosquito larvae. All right. So we've got our mosquito larvae that are the aquatic stages. We've got the larval stage. We've got the egg stage, the larval stage, and the pupa stage. And the larval stage, there's going to be 4 instars, right? And that's the size and the age of the mosquito larva. So copepods like to eat first instar larvae because they're just smaller. They thrive in habitats that are too small for fish, so they can do very well in abandoned tires and in fountains. They're convenient, inexpensive, and easy to transport. They can actually be sprayed out of a backpack sprayer. Like you spray chemical out of a backpack, you can spray copepods out of a backpack. They're persistent in the environment. And let's see if we can get this video to play. This is a copepod, and he's going to eat one of these mosquito larvae floating around him. There he goes. We'll see if he'll eat it again. Looks like he's got a couple in his mouth. Okay. We're going to move that along. Okay. Let's see. We're going to finish up this video. Okay, I'm trying to get out of this video. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to just exit out real quick and then we'll go right back in. Okay, so now we're going to look at the cannibal mosquito. All right, and the cannibal mosquito toxobronchitis is also known as the elephant mosquito, and it's the huge mosquito when it's an adult, right? Much bigger than the other ones. The larvae of these mosquitoes feed on other mosquito larvae, hence they're called cannibals. However, the adults that I mentioned that are really big, they do not blood feed, okay? They cannot blood feed, all right? So they're not a public health threat. They're not even a nuisance, right? Because they don't eat on humans, feed on human blood. They feed on nectar. Releases of these cannibal mosquitoes have shown limited success, though. So they're highly susceptible to pesticides. They're a treehole species, but they will occupy man-made containers where populations are established, and they can be useful in areas adjacent to forests. So let's see if we can get this video to play for us. So this large mosquito larva you see here, now that's the toxobronchitis cannibal mosquito larva. He's just hanging out, moving very slowly. He's going to be joined soon by some friends. Here's a friend. That small one is a regular mosquito larva, like an Aedes or a Culex. If he comes back over to him. Here he comes. Got him. I just think that's so amazing. It's kind of gross too, but that's biocontrol right there for you. You just sucks them up like spaghetti after that. Okay, so then we'll talk about BTI, which I mentioned is, it's a bacteria, right? Soil bacteria that they release toxins into water that affect mosquito larvae. All right, so toxin crystals bind to the midgut and cause cellular lysis. And then you have mosquito larvae ingest these toxins and they typically die within 4 to 24 hours. All right. Now, the BTI is Diptera specific, means it only harms flies, right? Diptera, 2 wings. Can use with different control methods, and it lowers the reliance on chemical insecticides, which therefore reduces development of resistance. So again, as I mentioned, BTI is categorized as bacterial control and is registered with the EPA. So you have to follow specific guidelines, i.e. the label, okay, to use it. But again, because technically bacteria is a single-celled living organism, we grouped it also with biocontrol organisms. So let's talk about prevention. All right. Everyone can and must help control mosquitoes. Okay. Professionals develop mosquito control plans and evaluate how well control programs are working. So these are your local health departments, your mosquito control districts, right? You, your neighbors, and your community can also take steps to reduce mosquitoes in and around your home and in your neighborhood. So you want to, get some knowledge. Anyone who's attending this today, thank you. All right, you're taking the first step. Source reduction, that is the #1 thing you can do around your home, right? Take 10 minutes. All right, I think I elaborated on this for 10 minutes a couple webinars ago. In-home prevention, right? Making sure that your screens don't have any holes, right? And then outdoor protection. And that's going to be using fans and stuff like that or repellents. Now, getting into source reduction, again, you want to check your property for standing water. Mosquitoes can breed in very small amounts of water, right? One of the things we love to say is they can breed in something the size of a bottle cap or in a bottle cap themselves, all right? Turn over containers and remove clutter because they can breed in clutter, right? They can breed in little kids' toys that were left outside, right? That are holding water. Check your storm drains and your gutters. Flush them through if needed. Dispose of bulky waste that holds water. Tires, plant trays, buckets, tarps, ice chests and children's toys. And so, coolers, everyone and every relative they have has a cooler in New Orleans, right? If you live in the Southeast, you're tailgating, right? So those little cup holders in those coolers hold water and they breed mosquitoes, right? Just dump them out or turn it over. Once a week is sufficient to check your yard, all right? And remember, minimum time from egg to adult is 6 to 7 days. Now, home prevention. Install or repair and use window and door screens. Do not leave doors propped open. Use air conditioning when possible. Trim the vegetation, okay? Why vegetation? Because mosquitoes rest on and in vegetation, right? Depending on the species, they're going to rest higher up or lower down. So you want to trim back the vegetation. They like to rest sometimes under the leaves, all right? Especially after they feed. People think mosquitoes are waiting for them, right? And then they jump out to bite them and take a blood meal. Well, they kind of are, right? They're resting, and then they're going to come eat when they're hungry. So kill mosquitoes in your home if you find them, right? Mosquitoes rest in the dark. They like humid places like under the sink, in closets, under furniture, under your desk, or in the laundry room. Source reduction, again, anything that may be holding water, get rid of it. So let's talk about outdoor protection, right? So limit your time outdoors from dusk until dawn. Wear long sleeves and pants if outside. That's easy to say, right? But again, where do we live? We all know what the temperature is like here in July, right? So you're not going to wear long pants and long sleeves, but that is what we recommend still, all right? And right now the weather's so nice. Actually, the sun just came out, and I bet the mosquitoes are probably going to come out too, right? So we know what we need to do. It's just hard to do it, right? But if you can, wear long sleeves and pants outside, put the fan on, and use Environmental Protection Agency registered insect repellents with one of the active ingredients below, like DEET or picaridin or IR 3535 or oil of lemon eucalyptus. All right, so you want to prevent bites, limit time outside from dusk till dawn, apply insect repellent, wear long sleeved shirts and pants, use AC, and repair your screens. Clothing and gear for outdoor protection. If doing extended outdoor activity, treat your gear with permethrin, right? Use 0.5% permethrin to treat boots, pants, socks, and tents. All right, permethrin is an insecticide that kills or repels mosquitoes. Permethrin treated clothing provides protection after multiple washes. All right, so follow product instructions. Do not use permethrin products directly on your skin, okay? Follow the label. Read the label, okay? This is one of the most important things, all right? When using any product, make sure you read the label, follow directions. We talked about this in part 3 of this webinar series. All right. Look for how often you should reapply. Can the product go on your skin or is it for clothing or equipment only, right? Look at the active ingredients. So here, directions of use. It is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with labeling. Here, reapply every 2 hours or after swimming, perspiration, vigorous activity or toweling, application to the face. Do not spray directly on or near the face, right? Read the rest of those directions. What are the active ingredients here? Warnings, right? If you get it in your eye, right? What should you do, right? If you ingest it, what should you do? All right, so read the label. Now, prevention and mosquito control districts. In response to 311 service requests, department calls, and other reports or when problem areas are seen during duty, all right, mosquito control districts will come out and they're going to inspect your yard and city-owned areas of the streets for standing water. They're going to remove, turn over, cover, empty, and rinse out containers. Now, if we're at your property and you've got containers holding water, you're going to empty them and rinse them out, okay? And you're going to continue that on a weekly basis, right? And then they can be treated with larvicides when appropriate. So if you have a broken fountain that's filled with water and you can't get the water out, we will put something in the fountain to stop the mosquitoes from breeding, all right? But you've got to do it too, right? You've got to make an effort, all right, around your own property. Let's talk about chemical control. All right. This is a necessary tool in integrated pest management, but should be used only when appropriate and with minimum risk in mind. Safety is always a priority for applicators, for the public, and for non-targets. All right. Extensive knowledge of chemicals, application methods, personal protection equipment, droplet size and deposition area and rates, half-life, residuals, etc., is required. So this is going to be you want to use highly targeted chemicals, so specific pesticides in specific target areas. And you got the big question, right? To spray or not to spray? That is the question. So the public have varying opinions on the use of pesticides. We do get a lot of requests to spray. And the use of pesticides must be an informed and minimal process. And there are advantages and disadvantages to pesticides. All right, so there is a proper way to use them both on commercial, government, or PCO, and private, residential, or personal use levels. So some advantages of using pesticides. Mosquito populations that persist using other methods may respond to chemical controls. Pesticide applications often yield dramatic and rapid reduction of targeted mosquito populations. Chemical controls often are the most practical method to achieve desired control. Often the application of pesticides is this prescribed intervention to halt epidemics of mosquito-borne disease. Now, this is usually pertaining to adult mosquitoes and using adulticides. Now, disadvantages of pesticides. Chemical controls are temporary, right? Reapplication is necessary. Some pesticides are expensive. So careful consideration of cost and benefit must be examined. Mosquito populations can develop resistance from frequent applications. And pesticides are designed contact neurotoxins. They're often systemic, which can potentially cause harm to other living organisms and the environment. All right, pyrethroids are highly toxic to fish. Okay. Specialized equipment and skilled and trained personnel are required for proper adulticide applications, right? Depending on how you're going to apply them. Applying them by backpack? Are you applying them by plane? Right? Everyone needs to be trained. So pesticide stewardship, right? Responsibility for environmental quality shared by all those whose pesticide application actions could possibly affect the environment. Terms such as IPM, resistance management, damage threshold, drift management, beneficial organisms, critical habitats, and potential for leaching should be well understood and be considered when developing or implementing a pest management program, right? So again, responsibility for environmental quality is shared by all those whose pesticide application actions could possibly affect the environment. All right. So proper and responsible use of pesticides is essential. Cannot stress that enough. Okay, so for commercial mosquito control, there are multiple methods utilizing different equipment, from large scale to small scale. You need to have the correct use and application. You want to attack mosquitoes at multiple life stages, right? At the aquatic and the terrestrial, the immature and the adult. Emphasis and emphasizing prevention in addition to control. So source reduction, use of repellents, and then insecticide resistance monitoring. And spraying as needed, using data as a guidance, right? So not spraying every Tuesday, for 52 weeks, regardless of the weather conditions. All right. Some districts do that. Okay. They spray on a weekly basis year round. This is not necessary since mosquitoes are not out year round, right? If it's too windy, raining, or cold. Some districts hire outside agencies to spray. So they will spray whether it is needed or not because they're paid to do so. It's in their contract. All right. This can contribute to pesticide resistant and target species, as well as non-target species like nuisance mosquitoes. All right. So spraying as needed using data as guidance is the preferable way to do any mosquito control. Now, there are fixed wing platforms, right? Airplanes, all right? That are used to cover large areas. You've got rotary wing platforms, helicopters, right? Used for chemical and bacterial applications, right? So you can spray chemical out of a helicopter, but you can also use it to spray BTI. There are truck mounted platforms. This is used for chemical or larvicide, BTI. They can also use drones, which is pretty cool for applying pesticides, and they can also be used for surveillance. Now, you have to have a pilot's license to use a drone. We've got the hand foggers and portable mist blowers that can be used. And again, you want to make sure that you're wearing your correct PPE. The guy in front of the truck, he looks like he's wearing correct PPE. The other guy, I'm not sure what's in his backpack, so I'm not sure if he's got the correct PPE. There's residual surface treatments, right? Or barrier sprays, right? Backyard sprays. Here, the product is usually heavily diluted in water and applied either as a coarse drenching spray on the leaf surfaces or an air blasted assisted mist system, which should cover all surfaces. And these usually last between 5 to 7 weeks, depending on environmental factors. So barrier treatments can be used by homeowners and by commercial pesticide applicators. All right, so what I recommend if you're interested in something like this is check with your local mosquito abatement district about insecticide resistance in your local mosquito populations. And then ask your commercial applicator what products they are using so you know what will work on your property. Otherwise, you're wasting your money, right? If the pest control applicators aren't using the right chemicals. Bacterial treatments like BTI might be a better option for you, and you can request those from commercial pesticide applicators. So let's go into larvicides. All right, so we've got different kinds of larvicides are available. You've got surface oils, which suffocate mosquito larvae. It's a mechanical barrier on the surface. Oil enters the siphon, blocking the passage of air and causes acute toxicity. All right. You have insect growth hormones, only used in closed water sources. All right. And it stunts the growth of the larva so that they're just stuck in one phase and then eventually they just die. You have BTI, as I've mentioned, often considered biocontrol organisms, but most common product actually used here in New Orleans. All right, we use this all the time. And then there are chemical larvicides. We don't tend to use them, but they are out there and available for use. Now, there's area-wide larvicide application, which I mentioned before, using trucks, right? It's similar to adulticide technology. It's a wind-driven droplet deposition. It can reach around houses into containers and into backyards. BTI is the product that's used. It has a larger droplet size, so it's light enough to stay aloft temporarily, but heavy enough to settle into containers. We've done a few tests with this throughout the city over the past few years. It's currently used as a targeted approach by truck in response to West Nile positive or high vector numbers. As I mentioned, we recently did a helicopter application of BTI for emergency response for disease outbreak. All right, that was just a couple of years ago we did that. And it was very successful. So harking back to the action threshold, right? One of the 4 aspects of integrated pest management, right? What governs our decisions about mosquito control actions? Data, all right? Positive pools of mosquitoes. Do the mosquitoes, are they carrying West Nile virus, right? High vector abundance. Are there a lot of them? And then resident service requests and complaints, right? So the number of 311 calls, agency calls, call-ins, right? And other observations throughout the city. So there are many factors to consider, right? As I mentioned, there's positive pools, vector species numbers, larvicides, adulticides, right? Or both. What product are we going to use? And then the extent of the problem areas, temperature, wind speed, right? When you read the label on chemicals, if we're going to use a chemical, it's going to tell you, like, if the wind speed's over 5 miles per hour, you can't put out a barrier treatment. That's the law. We got to follow it, right? Rainfall. We're not going to spray chemical in the rain, right? So equipment and staffing and product use are all factors to be considered. So for residential mosquito control, there's BTI formulations, which are available to the public, like mosquito dunks and granule formulations. Other options available include residual barrier sprays of vegetation, which may yield some results, but it's not a standalone method for prevention, okay? Source reduction is the #1 way to reduce mosquito numbers and the risk of bites around your residence, okay? That's the #1 way, source reduction. Also, using repellents with CDC-approved active ingredients to prevent bites. Okay, there's also misting systems. It does not follow IPM principles, right? They're scheduled sprays. They don't consider non-targets. They spray on demand, right? And so you can have flies around your home, but you think there might be mosquitoes and they're not. So like, what are you spraying, right? So we don't really recommend mosquito systems. Read the pesticide label. Okay, the label contains important information about the active ingredient, right? Make sure what you're using is for the pest you want. Target organisms, right? It'll tell you how to use it, what personal protective equipment must be worn, and so much more, okay? If you're going to spray, do not spray edibles or flowers, okay? Prevent non-target effects. Do not spray fountains, pools, bird baths, all right? You can use BTI in bird baths. Don't spray anything else in there. Now, reasons to be considerate for non-target effects. 1, it's the law, right? Follow the label. Protect our pollinators, all right? We need pollinators so we can have crops, we can have food. You don't want to diminish or distract from the mission of mosquito control, right? Be considerate of non-target effects for safety and liability reasons, right? Poor product stewardship is unprofessional. And be environmentally mindful. And you want to limit exposure in time and space, meaning limit your own exposure to pesticides. Now, I briefly want to talk about insecticide resistance. You want to make sure the insecticide you are using actually works. Okay, this saves time and money, and it prevents you from exposing yourself or others to chemicals unnecessarily. All right, there are lots of ways that mosquito programs can monitor or screen for insecticide resistance. Here in New Orleans, we use topical applications and we use bottle bioassays, all right? So bottle bioassays, the CDC actually makes a kit that comes with insecticides. It has testing bottles, pipettes, and a protocol. You just see the mosquitoes and the acetone for mixing. And the CDC uses a diagnostic dose, which is the dose of insecticide that kills 100% of susceptible mosquitoes within a given time. And it uses a diagnostic time, which is the expected time for the insecticide to kill 100% of susceptible mosquitoes. Mortality is determined by the inability of the mosquito to right itself, meaning it cannot stand, they have erratic behavior. So this is the chart that comes with the protocol that you see on the slide here. You've got your kit, you've got the diagnostic dose and time. So if you wanted to see if deltamethrin kills your Quincke fasciatus, you go over here, you've got deltamethrin with this blue arrow. So your Culex Quincke fasciatus from the field should die in 60 minutes if you're exposing them to the deltamethrin that comes with the kit. All right, so very simple to use, right? Especially when you follow their protocol. We also use topical application assays. These you need to prepare your own chemicals. You also need to rear a susceptible population alongside your field population. And you do this by making serial dilutions with technical grade chemical. You test your susceptible strain prior to testing your field population. And the topical application uses a discriminating dose. So you have your lethal dose, which is a fixed amount of insecticide. You have your LD50, which is your lethal dose that kills 50% of a test population, and then your discriminating dose, which is a dose that discriminates between susceptible and resistant in a test population. Any that survive the discriminating dose is considered resistant. So we also do insecticide mechanism testing, right? So if you find your mosquito population is resistant to a chemical, the next question to ask is why? Why are they resistant? So there are 4 major mechanisms of resistance. There's reduced penetration, behavioral resistance, metabolic resistance, and altered target site. All right. In New Orleans, we run metabolic and altered target site testing on Culex Quincke fasciatus and altered target site on Aedes aegypti, also known as like KDR. All right. We're looking at organophosphate resistant and pyrethroid resistance. And the data from these tests let us know what chemicals work, which chemicals we need to buy, and if we should use other methods than chemical control like source reduction and biocontrol on our mosquitoes. And again, we're looking at Aedes aegypti and Culex Quincke fasciatus here in New Orleans. So on that note, I'm going to hand this presentation over to my director, Dr. Claudia Regal.
Thanks, Erin.
You're
All right,
welcome.
let me, great job there. Okay, great. So I'm Claudia. So I'm the director of City of New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board. So I was answering some of the questions in the chat. That's who was doing it. So, you know, again, another very important part of an integrated mosquito management program is education and outreach, right? So we spend a lot of time doing this. Many of you may follow us already at NOLA Mosquito. We tend to post things, of course, for the public, but also for the professionals about what's training it may be coming up and things you may want to know. But we have worked through quite a few emergencies from floods and hurricanes and tornadoes and West Nile virus, as well as Zika knocking at our door. So we've done a lot of different things. And so very important, I want you all to think about who you're communicating with and taking that multi-agency approach. So very, very important that your messaging is coordinated. And so with your other agencies, your sister agencies, that everyone is saying the same message. So we do that here. We have to work through a communications department, but we also work with our health department, code enforcement, and it might be sanitation, depending on what it is, the mayor's office, but we also work with our state partners. So I want everybody to really, you know, look, at this day and age, it seems like everyone's having some sort of emergency. So think about writing those press releases, how you're going to communicate with that public in advance. It is very difficult to do it when you're in the heat of the moment. Again, another point here is when we're doing education and outreach, so it's not just the public, right? It's the professionals, it's the administrators, it's the co-workers, it's pest control industry. I really want everybody to stress the importance of doing surveillance. So that is a huge part of what we do. The traps go out. We have 46 standard locations. We actually have more that we do, each week. But definitely, if we're looking for the Southern House Mosquito, is 46 locations throughout New Orleans, and those traps go out every Monday and they get picked up every Tuesday. And so that's a tremendous amount of resources. But we really explain why we do this work and how we use that data to our administrators. And so you can actually see here our mayor, our CAO right there, and they have a really good grasp about what we do. So we're very proud of that. You might have medical questions, all right? And so I am not a medical doctor. I have a PhD, but I'm not a physician. So even though we might know what those answers are, it's really important to really refer those medical questions to the physicians. And often that's the Department of Health. And of course, everyone's looking, and Erin already touched it on a little bit here as well, but what topics are you trying to get across? Especially personal protection, right? So we always say that mosquito control, vector control, pest control, it's a partnership. And so again, figure out what those messages that will be important for your district and what you're going to communicate. You can actually see here, there's a small flyer, the one in blue at the bottom right-hand corner. And these flyers really need to be unique, right? So that it relates to the folks, your population that is in your district. And so these are just some great examples here, but those are little houses, the shotgun house, it's very typical of New Orleans. And as Erin had mentioned, everyone seems to have a cooler in their backyard, right? So pick those things that are relatable to your public. And again, it might have to be in multiple languages so that you're reaching everybody. So again, make sure that they know how to communicate it, where they can call back. We happen to have a 311 system. Not everyone does, but at least provide all that information. And again, what are those important topics? And little icons are a really great way of reinforcing, the text that you have there. So one of the things that we do here at the City of New Orleans is we really focus on training the professionals in our district. So the whole point here is the more trained professionals we have, the more unified workforce you're going to have with mosquito control, or it may be in rodent or whatever we're trying to teach that day. But these are just some examples from our facility. You can see that we spend a lot of time training on insect ID, hands-on training. That upper right-hand corner is learning about molecular diagnostics. And then, of course, you've got Mosquito Academy at the bottom right-hand side, and then a recertification of the licensing for pest control. So we really try to touch on everyone, including our state sanitarians as well that are in environmental health. All those folks, we do specialized training for them. Now, what's really fun, of course, is outreach events for the public. And this is from 2018 with Bugfest. We had Bugfest again last year, and we'll have it again in October 12th of this year. So we're really excited. But that really is to target the residents of Greater New Orleans. And so we try to put it on the news. There are a lot of different partners. We had about 1,500 people that attended last year. We hope to actually grow that even more. And this really talks about the professionalism of what we do, right? And so people get an opportunity to interact with folks from all different walks of life and professions that are here. School visits, of course, we all do this. Of course, you're hitting a smaller number of people, but it's really honestly for the kids that are attending super high impact. And it's actually honestly super fun getting in there because all the little kids are always so excited. And I know somebody had put in the chat about toxorynchites, and yes, there are ambassadors in a lot of ways because you can bring them in. They're so big, people love to look at it. So really as a summary here, look, mosquito control is complicated. And so there are a lot of components to it. And so, of course, you need to have some sort of plan, right? And so there are plans out there. If you're not familiar, if your district doesn't have one specifically, a lot of other folks do, and you can look at their plans, and hopefully that'll help you initiate it and how you're making decisions. Monitor, surveillance, right? And pest ID, really important. You need to understand what pests you're dealing with. Not every mosquito is the same, and some you will do nothing, and some you will do a lot as far as implementing controls. We definitely want to continue to push on community participation. We just had big rains here, national news actually, on the North Shore of New Orleans in St. Tammany Parish, but some places had over 8 inches of rain in a very short period of time. So in a couple of days, right, probably tomorrow, we'll start with our social media campaign to say, look, we need you all to turn over your containers. They're all full. And so we need to start explaining to folks what is going to be happening in the next week or so. As far as pesticides, again, you have to make a decision when you're going to use it. Do you larvicide? Do you adulticide? So your program and all the different things you're doing is going to dictate that. And of course, understanding insecticide resistance within the populations of mosquitoes in your region or like in your area. So very important, because you definitely want to use products that are actually killing the mosquitoes that you have there. And when you can rotate it, we need to rotate. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of options out there for pesticides that we can use. But again, it might be rotating with a larvicide. So one of the things I wanted to sort of mention here for all of you is that we continue to do these different series of mosquito webinars, but we also do termites and rodents and all kinds of things. You can follow us at NOLA Mosquito. That really is going to be the best way to reach us. But what I did want to talk to you just briefly here, about 15 minutes, is this big project that we have here in New Orleans that goes across the Gulf South, but there's really actually national implication for everyone. And so the CDC funded a project last July, so we're in the 4th quarter of the first year, and they had a call for papers, and it's for coordinated training and evaluation of professionals and pre-service students to achieve an integrated workforce to mitigate vector-borne disease in the Gulf Coast region. So as you can see, it's from ticks all the way to mosquitoes and fleas and all these different environments that we have. What are we trying to do here? This is a 5-year project. It's a multi-million-dollar project. I'm going to show you how many partners we have. And it's really important because we're creating a lot of the documents that actually Erin and myself, we just talked about in an integrated mosquito management program. But we're really trying to create a strong network, right, of people, professionals, and then students that are going to go into this particular field. These are a few of the partners. It keeps growing, it seems, every single week. But it started out with some, we have about 13 universities and private industry, and it's been adding, we've been adding different associations and different organizations to it. So these are some of the ones that are listed. If you're interested, I'm going to have the contact information. You can actually put your information in the chat. We'll be happy to reach out if you belong to a particular association or you think somebody might be interested. So again, sort of, I love the educational part of things, but who needs to be trained in this field? Frankly, everybody does, right? We all need to have a really good understanding about what vector control is. And I really am talking specifically here, mosquitoes, fleas, ticks, mites as well. There's some other biting flies that are important. We are throwing rodents in there because they're the reservoir for the fleas and the mites. And so again, it's the residents, but it's the decision makers, your elected officials and state representatives and students and everybody else in between really needs to have a good understanding about what is vector-borne disease and preparedness, and hopefully the control measures as well. So in order to do this is a 5-year project, as I've mentioned. We're going to do it in 3 ways: by training, evaluating, and partnering. So we appreciate it. We're going to go through each one of these very briefly. But one is to create a core curriculum with discipline-specific modules in each region. And so there are lots of different manuals that are out there. You can look at your own state that you're in and see what is available. And so one of the things we want to do is look at all that's out there in the Gulf South states, and we're going to create one unified platform, right? So one document that's going to cover all of those states. Now, of course, each state's a little different, and of course, there will be specific modules to address the uniqueness of each one. But for the most part, everyone's learning from that same document. We're also creating a lot of presentations and other training materials. If it's from mosquitoes to all kinds of different topics that we're going to create and make available on the website platform, that it's almost like a train the trainer, right? So if you want to teach and you don't have the ability of getting the photographs or creating those documents, you're going to be able to visit that website and download this information, which I think is going to be great. We're also creating branded professional content. This is with a professional filmmaker. And actually, we have a demo of it already, the first version of it. And it's really to communicate in a very succinct way what is the importance of these particular topics in vector control. And look, we do a great job, right, of talking to each other. And you guys are all here listening to our PowerPoint, which is really great. You're here. But the bottom line is we need to sort of look out, right, into the other folks. And so part of it is branding. And so the importance of branding. So you can see we're actually really happy with the logo that we have. And that was really working with professionals that do this for a living. And that brand book is very important for brand identity, your mission, your core values, all of that, the visual style. It really creates a nice cohesive package so that if you see your PowerPoint that's Gulf South Vector, pow, you know right away because it all looks very similar. So again, this is something that you can consider for your own organization. And there are folks out there, students that do this for a living. Very important is to reach all levels, from awareness level, folks that maybe should know about mosquito and vector control, all the way to your expert level, like the folks that are doing the molecular diagnostics and flying that helicopter, all of those things. And so these are just a few examples of some of the trainings that are Gulf South Vector certified that's been involved with this project. And we can go across the board. It goes all the way across the Gulf states, but everything from pesticide safety to mosquito identification to animal health employees. You can see that bottom right. Those are humane life officers that are in the field. And so beacons, there's all kinds of different folks that have attended these. This is a little bit outdated because it changes every week, but we're close to 13,000 professionals since July 1st that have received some sort of training. We're actually almost double on the travel award. So I'm letting all of you know this because it's out there. And this is a great way. And I suggest that, sign up for this information and to receive information about opportunities because you may be eligible as well. So again, very, very important, right? And Erin actually touched on this a little bit on the integrated mosquito integrated mosquito management, primarily through AMCA, right? So what are those core competencies? That's the bottom of the page there. But CDC has core competencies in mosquito control and NACCHO as well. And so we are looking at all of this to see what makes sense, right? And we've looked at it and we put together and we actually added a little bit more as far as having that robustness and that preparedness level, so you can actually respond to a vector-borne disease outbreak. But so like, for example, so that's that. So we're doing needs assessments actually. And so those needs assessments are based on these core competencies, and we hope to be doing some certifications of the programs as well. So we're doing in-depth interviews. We actually did our first one this Monday, but we are looking at how to analyze the data and really just bring great information so that we can understand the capacity in each of the states. We've been identifying programs. Here's Texas, so with state local health departments in the region. And so also this one happens to be mosquito control districts across the states. Not every county or parish is going to have it. And then we wanted to know who does surveillance, right? And so then we can sort of see here too, who is doing surveillance, essentially collecting mosquitoes and, having it there. So as we do a deep dive of what each of these programs really do, we'll have a much better understanding. As it relates to rodents, not too many programs in the Southeast. And then ticks as well, and ectoparasites, even less. So again, this will change constantly as we get more information. We also are understanding what universities are there, from two-year programs, technical schools, all the way to universities, because we're going to be looking at their curriculum. How can we improve it? How can we contact those students and put them boots on the ground? Anyway, so that's important. Real quick, we're also going to have these operational centers of excellence. So our program with St. Tammany Parish, which is about 35 miles from New Orleans, we're going to be one of those centers in Florida, Anastasia Mosquito Abatement District. I did actually put this in the chat because there was a question about sterile males. They're actually ramping up to do that now. So if you're interested in that program, very important, you can contact them. It's always so great to get the boots on the ground perspective. So what do we hope with these programs is there's going to be lots of collaboration among the centers, but also places where people can go within the state to go get trained, exchange ideas. So it's very, very important. We're also going to be working on accrediting programs. Do you hit those core competencies? If you don't, how can we improve so we can improve our overall preparedness and capacity, training all different levels, right? And also training students. It's so great. We were all students as well, right? You learn all the books, but we need to teach the boots on the ground component, which is very good. And also we want these programs to last longer than the 5 years of funding. And so we believe this is the way it's going to be done. We're going to be doing a survey, and you don't need to actually do this now. We can send it out later, but we're going to be doing some surveys to understand how all of you want to learn and what do you want to learn about. So when you do receive the survey via email, if you could please take 10 to 15 minutes and complete it for us, it's going to help us so much. These are anonymous surveys, but we do know what profession you're in and what zip code you're in. So hopefully we'll be able to gather that information and offer. Is it a 1 hour training? Is it a workshop that you want? Is it online? All that information is going to be there. So you can see that we have, this is just a pilot of it, about 250 something people. We're well over 500 now, but it gives us an idea of who's participating, and there's a lot of in-person requests, actually, some online courses, but we'll go through, and this again is going to update. This is very preliminary. So I really encourage everybody, and this is wrapping it up here, is to break down the silos, right? So we often are so busy and we're working in our own field, and honestly, you're all here attending a seminar. So that is part of breaking down the silo and collaborating and getting to know who else works in your field. But it encourages collaborations and it supports better decision-making process because we all are learning. You can always learn something. I actually feel that it boosts productivity and it fosters innovation, right? So new ideas, new ways of thinking about things, which is very important. And so I'll leave this up here for a minute, and then we'll wrap it up. I'll kick it over to Astasia. But if you want to learn more about this program and receive information about it, just use your QR code right there. It'll just take you about a minute or two, or probably a couple minutes just to fill out the information, and you'll get it added onto the list. And so we don't bombard anybody with too much information, but there's some really good things coming down the pipe. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Astasia and see if there's any other questions in the chat.
So I'm just going to go over a few questions, even some of the ones you answered, Claudia, so other people may have a chance who can't see the chat will hear some answers. One of the first questions was, what did it mean by positive pool? And I responded that that's in reference to a testing pool of mosquitoes that we send to be tested. And when we say a positive pool, it's when maybe that pool tested positive for West Nile virus or something like that.
Perfect. Yep.
Then the next question was, what is New Orleans doing to remove and reduce the number of tires used in the city? And Claudia answered that we work with several other departments such as sanitation, code enforcement, NOPD, to try to help remove tires. We have a problem with, other states coming in to dump tires. So it's definitely a multi-department effort to reduce the number of tires around the city. And then what is intentionally releasing sterile mosquitoes an effective biocontrol option on a large scale. Claudia referenced that Anastasia County in Florida is actually trying to do that and suggested there's a suggestion in the chat to reach out to them about more information regarding that. Let's see, other questions in the chat. Where do you get your copepods and predatory mosquito larvae? And Claudia, I also put a link to a paper about the copepods and how to get them in the field. We also get our fish in a similar fashion. Claudia, do you have anything to add about that?
Yeah, so we've been working, our some of the employees at our office have been working with copepods probably for close to 30 years. So we have colonies here. But what I did mention is they're really easy to get. You can actually go out in the field and maybe go look at some tires or some standing water. You may need a sieve to take with you, but I think you can collect some out in the field. I believe Carolina Biological also sells, I know they sell the paramecium that they eat, but if anybody is interested in how to rear a copepod colony, Ms. Cynthia Harrison that works with us is an expert at this. Just put your name in the chat or just send Stacy at education@nola.gov. Just make a request and we'll put you in touch with Cynthia and she'll let you know how what the next steps would be.
So those are all the questions I really see in the chat right now. If anyone has a chance to review the chat, like I said, Claudia put a link to a paper in there that may be interesting about the copepods and some other information about the sterile. We just want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Once again, this webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, which could be searched by searching New Orleans Mosquito Control or Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board. If you're in New Orleans watching this and you see any mosquito or rodent issues, please call 311 so that we can come out and address them. If you have any comments or suggestions for future webinars, you can email us at education@nola.gov. Any pictures of the traps or stations or rodenticides or insecticides that were shown today are for educational purposes only and do not represent an endorsement by New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board. And this presentation is to be used for educational purposes only. Also, our next series will be starting April 18th, and we'll start our 4-part series on termite control. So if you would like to sign up for that, the link will be going out shortly. I'll send an email and the sign up period will be the same. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Aaron and Claudia, for the presentation, and we'll see everyone hopefully in next week, next Thursday.